Okay, the Dogs are going to check in as a 23.5-point favorite over Georgia Tech. That's a big old line. But, I mean, it's probably in the universe of being right. Georgia's not been great covering these big lines. That would mean you're looking at like a 45 to 20, something like that score. That's, that'd be how you'd have to cover that line, something like that. That's a lot. That's a lot. And Tech, Tech, it's just been so up and down, y'all. It's just not been a great consistent season for them, but they've been very up and down. They got a win or two over a ranked team. I mean, North Carolina was one of them, so I don't know what that means, but they just looked horrible against Clemson. But then they got bowl eligible on Saturday, which set off a really big explosion celebration for the Jackets. First time they've gone to a bowl game since Paul Johnson was the head coach. So it's been a big turnaround season for them, and this will be a sort of stepping stone for Brent Key. I think he's done, comparatively speaking and considering everything, I think he's done pretty well. I don't, they'd be sitting at 7-4 right now had they not had that just bizarre loss earlier this season to, I can't remember who it was, but it was bad. It was bad. And you just can't lose like that. They beat Syracuse last night in Atlanta, but they're gonna have to play the best game they played this century to beat this Georgia team. And that's not hyperbole, I don't think. They hung in there with Louisville earlier this year. Louisville's gonna play for the ACC championship, y'all. They were beating Louisville, as I recall. They lost that game by 5. And then a couple games later, they go to Mississippi and played pretty well. Got blown out, but they played pretty well. Lost by 15. Then they go to Wake and win. It's the Bowling Green loss that everybody's like, what in the world? And of course, the strangest close to a game this season was their win over Miami, which I think shows to me that they stick with it, y'all. That's, they're not just going to roll over and die. So that game right there proved that they were still in it. They thought about it. It was a collapse by Miami, but one team's collapse is another's great comeback. Boston College then a week later beat them by 15 at home. So I don't. And then they turn around, I think a week after that, no, it was 2 weeks after that they lost to Boston College with a collapse, or with a 15-point loss. And then they turn around a week after that and beat North Carolina by 4, or ranked North Carolina at the time. So I just don't know. And then they throttled Virginia, and then they got killed by Clemson, and they beat Syracuse. It may just be that they're kind of an every other week team, but that's not good when you're playing Georgia and it's the every other week, because the Dogs are coming to town. Mark Richt Field, ABC, 7:30 kick. It's gonna be jammed with Georgia people, first of all, but I don't say there's no way, but Georgia Tech's not winning this game. That's just not happening. It would have to be total collapse and failure of epic proportions for Georgia to lose this game. I don't see it. I'm not sure I see them covering almost 24 points necessarily in a sandwich game, but I don't know. Hey, make sure you're signing up for our newsletter. The link is right down below. People who sign up this week get a chance to get the 2024 recruiting guide for free. I'm not making a lot of them, so enter in now. Get your newsletter on, and we'll take it from there. You can see our buddies from EcoPoly got me hooked up today. This is a two-tone chair, Adirondack chair. That's what I call it. This is all made in-house. This is all made in-house down in Eastman. And I'm not exaggerating when I say these are extremely comfortable. They're very durable with a 20-year warranty, made of completely recycled plastics down in Dodge County. They've been great with us and to us, and we appreciate everything EcoPoly's done. We look forward to working with them through probably the playoffs. Is that what's going to happen with the Dogs? We're going to see. They're going to play in a New Year's Six Bowl at worst. I know that's not the plan. But, there's some big games coming up, man. Georgia's looking at like a 4 to 5 point favorite over Alabama right now. That's not been sort of officially released, but yeah, I think 23.5 is a lot. And I think that once you factor into this, I mean, how many is Ladd going to play? I just don't know. So Georgia Tech is going to have a tremendously hard time scoring on Georgia. That's the challenge. This is really a third and fourth quarter bet. If you're betting this, which I would not, but if you are betting this, you're sweating the third and fourth quarter because let's just say Georgia gets out 35-7. Yeah, that's a cover for now. And is Georgia's defensive reserves, are they going to come in there and shut it down? Is Tech going to pop a crazy play? If Tech plays like they did against Clemson, that line is way too low. Way too low. So there's that. But, I wonder how much Georgia will be thinking about Alabama. They can say all the right things, but I wonder how much they'll be thinking about Bama. I wonder how much, they'll... This game being at night is probably the worst possible outcome that could have come from the scheduling of this weekend. But if you're ABC and you're Disney, you're making a bet that Georgia's going to get to the playoff, and this is a great way to promote them. You don't want to go Georgia. You got Georgia. You don't want to go head-to-head against the Iron Bowl. You don't want to go head-to-head against Ohio State, Michigan. So this is a calculated bet by them. But because of that, now you're Georgia, and instead of sort of stealing a day, you're wasting a day on Saturday. And there's, you'll still get back to Athens at 1, maybe 12, something like that. It won't be the end of the world, but it'd be better to get back here at 6 or something like that, or 5. And then, if there's got to be treatment, you sort of steal that half a day. Alabama's playing at Auburn, so they'll still get to Tuscaloosa that night. So it's not like it's some crazy, you're not asking so much of them, but still, I mean, all these hours do add up, and you'd like it to be that, if you're Georgia, you could get back home quicker. But it's what it is. I mean, there's nothing we can do about when they schedule the games. But I think that's a healthy line. It might spook me a little bit. I'm not sure. I have to look at it. And I know this. I know that once you get over 14 as the line for Georgia playing against anybody else, the likelihood of the other team winning the game really, really falls. It just doesn't happen. In terms of covering the game, in terms of for the line, that I think is something I'm going to have to look up, because I can't imagine that Georgia just consistently covers 20 plus point lines. They have not this year. I mean, think about South Carolina, Auburn. There have been a lot of games where Georgia has not covered these lines. That's a healthy big line, y'all. And I mean, you're asking a lot to go to Mark Richt Field and win this game by 3.5 touchdowns. I think you're asking a lot because of the second half. You just don't know. If they get up 21, they're shutting it down, man. They're going to start running the ball and bleeding the clock and getting to Atlanta. They're just going to go, take the bus and do all that stuff and be done with it, because they got responsibilities for the SEC championship on Sunday, and then the players have it on Monday. And then Kirby does his press conference on Monday. So you kind of that's the thing. This is the first time this game's been at night since 2010. That game was in Athens with bowl eligibility on the line for the Dawgs. I think for Tech too, although I'm not sure. No, it couldn't have been. That might have been one of those years where you could go at 5-7 or something like that, and Tech went. But in 2009, I can tell you, I remember well. That is the only time in my life that I thought Georgia Tech would beat Georgia, and they did not. I can confirm. I would say I could not believe it. It was, my old friend who covers the Falcons now, Josh Kendall. I remember he actually was helping me with Georgia Kentucky, and Georgia gotten beaten by Kentucky, and it was an upset in Athens. They had just beaten Auburn, and there was not a lot of hope that Georgia had beat the Jackets that day in 2009, and it was prime time. It was an 8 o'clock ABC game, And I just remember Josh saying the week before, he's like, I don't think this means that they lose to Georgia Tech. And I was like, man, you're nuts. Because Tech was hot, I think they were number 9 or 8 in the country. And so that was like the demarcation point for this series. As soon as Georgia won that game and we run this state game, the game has not been the same since. Yes, Tech upset Georgia in 14. Yes, they upset it wasn't a massive upset, and beat Georgia with a comeback in Kirby's first year. But this century, Georgia Tech's won against Georgia 4 times. That's it. That's not a lot. That would be the year 2000, 08, 14, and 16. That's it. And the 09 game, though, y'all, was a situation where, that's the last time I've seen Bobby Dawg really riled up and rocking. It was at night. It was, the crowd got on to him. But Georgia just was not having any of it at all. That was a night where you were letting Big Brother was letting Little Brother know what time it was. That is one of the great wins of all time at Georgia. Now, I know people don't understand when I say stuff like that sometimes, but I'm telling you, you don't understand how low Georgia was at that moment. It was bad. And, after that game, Mark fired Willie Martinez, John Fabris. I think somebody else got fired. I can't remember who it was. And John Jancig, I think. And they moved on to, Todd Grantham and sort of the later years of the Mark Richt tenure. But they, from 2000, I can report this too, from 2008 until Mark left, they took time to study that option against Georgia Tech. It only took Jeremy Pruitt, resident genius Jeremy Pruitt, to screw that up in 14 and give the Jackets, an opportunity to move the ball a little bit more. That 14 game was wild. And Georgia Tech had some great mental toughness that day. They deserved to win that game. Georgia deserved to win it too. But, that was rough. But, a year later, Mark Richt wasn't going out a loser. And he certainly wasn't going to go lose on his home field at Georgia Tech. And what they did to Tech that day was they shut him down. And I don't know if Jeremy went back to what he should have been doing the whole time or not or what, but they scored 7 points, I think it was, the Jackets. So, and then, that next day Mark was let go, and 2 days later Kirby was hired. I mean, I don't know if he was hired before that or not or when. I mean, 15 was bad just as a season, like a blur. I mean, it was rough. But, I don't know if we'll ever see Tech the same way it was before that 9 game. Because the 9, in 7 and 5 was a night game and was a rock and roller, man. That thing was, that was a night game too. And it could get live there when the Dawgs come. But I just don't know. And see, for you younger guys out there, you really, you'll never appreciate this series because it's been so one-sided. And, 17-3 or whatever it's, lately, that's not competitive. So folks don't really get it. But, if you grew up in Atlanta and you had a childhood around Georgia Tech and all these things, you'd get it. And I think if you went to Georgia at a different time, you could understand it. And let me just say this for the record too. If you are at Georgia, it is unacceptable to ever lose to Georgia Tech. You can't say that in other games, in other rivalries. Georgia Auburn, Georgia the Gators, Clemson and South Carolina, NC State, Carolina. You can't say that. It is never acceptable for Georgia to lose to Georgia Tech in football. It may happen, but it is not okay. There's no scenario where that is an okay thing, and that needs to be hammered home. Because Brock Bowers doesn't know about this rivalry. He knows about them absolutely thrashing Georgia Tech. Carson Beck has no. These guys don't know because they've not lived in the past, and they shouldn't. This is a different era. These are the golden years. These are the good old days right now. But I can tell you, Kirby Smart knows. Kirby Smart's first game as head coach, lost to Georgia Tech. Kirby Smart's last game in Sanford, lost to Georgia Tech. He knows. And he will hammer it home to everybody. But this is one of those rivalries where, people, if you're not from the state, you don't get it. If you're not from Atlanta, you don't get it, and that's fine. But you know, it is a massive major game for the Dogs. It is an unacceptable loss. That is not a result that is okay. So the Dogs are going to open up as a 23.5-point favorite. I probably went too long here, which is fine. We'll start talking about the Jackets, and I have much to say as usual. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the website.